Schiff of California. He's a member of the Senate Judiciary Committee and has called for an audit of who at the Department of Justice has handled all the Epstein-related records. I want to understand what you're looking for. Obviously, you sort of planted the flag on that audit, raising the question. We know they've been through all of the files at least once looking for Donald Trump's name. That was reported by multiple news organizations. Susie Wiles confirms in a series of 11 on-the-record interviews that Trump is in the files. But I wonder if you have evidence that things were tampered with or just concerns that they could be that led to that call for the audit.
Well, when I issued that letter, it was concerns that they wouldn't be forthcoming in what they were going to provide to the American people. And those fears have become all too realized today with this completely unlawful withholding of information from the Justice Department. It is a violation of the law. And I think, frankly, the remedies now have to be stronger than what I earlier proposed. I think we ought to bring Pam Bondi before the Senate Judiciary Committee, demand answers as to why the department has violated the law. It's not just that they had 30 days to go through this to do the production. They've had the whole year to do it. They promised to release the files. They haven't done it. They could have been completely ready for this moment, and they're not. Or they're just simply willfully withholding the materials. I think the Judiciary Committee should do its real oversight and bring her in and demand answers. I also think we need an Inspector General's investigation of what they've done and to ride shotgun on this to make sure that they're producing everything they're required to. We should consider other remedies, including litigation if necessary, but there needs to be accountability here.
What did you think they would do? I mean, are you at all surprised that they've been less than forthcoming?
I'm not surprised that they have withheld, but I am surprised that it is to this scale. What I imagine would happen is they would make a production today, and then we would have to fight to find out what was redacted and what wasn't. The statute requires them to make a report to Congress within 15 days about anything that withheld and what they produced. I think we should also demand that right now, because what Todd Blanche is saying is, we've given you some now, we'll give you some later, we may give you some after that. If they read the statute as saying that they can string this out indefinitely and wait giving us that cataloging of what they produced and what they haven't, we may never find the answer to that question. So at a minimum, the Justice Department needs to produce that summary, that log right now. What have they produced now? What have they withheld? And why have they withheld it? And those answers need to be provided ASAP.
If you put back sort of your investigator-prosecutor hat on, Pam Bondi went on Fox News and told the hosts of a program there that the list is sitting on her desk. She does an about face before releasing any list. Kash Patel went on Joe Rogan and talked about 300 gigabytes of data, videotapes and pictures and whatnot. He testified before Congress that there's nothing, that basically Epstein didn't traffic any women to anyone. And we know from the survivors that that is a lie. What do you think they are all butting up? What do you think they see that turns Bondi and Patel into liars on the specific issue of the Epstein file, something they've talked about for years?
Well, the only one they really serve is Donald Trump. So they must see something in those files that they don't want to share with the American people. Now, it may not be evidence of criminality on Trump's behalf, but it may be evidence that that embarrasses the president, reflects poorly on the president. And of course, written into that legislation is very explicit prohibition on withholding anything for reasons of reputational harm to any elected official. So that is not a legal basis for them to withhold information. But I wouldn't be surprised if, as a practical matter, they have promised the president they won't release anything that makes him look bad, even if it comes at the cost of the victims getting the full information. And that's just not going to cut it. If we're going to do serious oversight, frankly, unlike what we've done so far, you know, Bondi needs to come in and actually answer questions, not just use her time to try to insult or attack members of the committee. But we need this on a bipartisan basis. The legislation passed on a bipartisan basis. Both parties ought to insist on answers. And if not, I think the public needs to hold them accountable for this continuing cover-up.
Danielle Bensky, one of the survivors, talked about the manipulation from Epstein and his allies that continues now that he's, even though he's dead. And I wonder, as the issue becomes more front of mind for a larger swath of Americans, 81% of Americans think Donald Trump is covering something up in the Epstein files. Those numbers, I'm sure, will swell as news reports cover what is and is not in today's release. Would you consider legislation to protect the survivors who have spoken out?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, they have endured enough as it is, and I know many survivors have reported that they've experienced threats and terrible communications that they've received. No one should go through that additional trauma. But I agree the manipulation continues. It seems to continue even beyond the grave. It continues in the form of this kind of slow walking of information and release of information. It was, I think, very much a feature of the Justice Department at Pam Bondi announcing that they're going to investigate, at the president's demand, Democrats who are in the Epstein files. That's another manipulation. It doesn't matter whether Democrats or Republicans or independents or nonpartisan people are implicated in these files. They should all that information should come out. It's, I think, hard to imagine the victims getting the kind of justice they deserve unless that happens. And I can only imagine how vexing it is for the victims to see this kind of manipulation continue.
Julie K. Brown of the Miami Herald is also on our panel today for our coverage, has made the point that the victims are so used to being stonewalled and not receiving transparency or accountability that they may not be surprised, although I'm sure they'll be greatly disappointed that their trauma continues. Are you at all surprised by the lack of production today?
I'm surprised by the magnitude of it. I'm not surprised that they're withholding information. Part of this is a consequence, I think, frankly, of Chief Justice Roberts giving the president absolute immunity when it comes to his instructions to the Justice Department. So he can pretty much order them to do what he wants and knows that he will never be held, at least criminally, liable. So I'm not surprised that they're withholding. I am surprised at the magnitude of it, the audacity of it. The plain statement by Blanche that they're withholding hundreds of thousands of documents. Yeah. And indeed, that might be just the tip of the iceberg. So yes, that does surprise me. It's a kind of in your face. We will ignore the law as we choose. We will go at our own pace. Whether we provide things at all will be up to us. It's a kind of arrogance, a kind of drunkenness with power that believes you can ignore the law without any peril.
When you're president, they let you do it. Senator Adam Schiff, thank you for joining our coverage. I want to bring into our coverage